Hey everyone, and welcome to Great Lakes Church Online. My name is Carson, and it's such a privilege to have you joining us. If you don't know who we are a community of people helping people find and follow Jesus. We're based in the southeast Wisconsin area with one physical location in Kenosha, but hopefully many more locations as you tune in on YouTube or any podcast platform to check out this week's dose of encouragement. We hope that whatever you hear today prompts you to take the next step in your faith journey. And if you'd like to know more about who we are, get involved through giving, or just join us in our physical location, go to greatlakechurch.com to find everything you need to know. But until then, enjoy the talk.
I am so excited to start this series with you this week. I think it's huge. It's huge for me in my personal life. I believe it's going to be big for you in yours, but also for us as a church community as we think about what does the next chapter look like and how do we start into it as we come to the close maybe of one already. It reminds me of my childhood, actually, way back when I was in between my 4th and 5th grade years, and I had joined the band. Yeah, I'm that cool. I joined the band, and I was okay pretty quick. At least good enough that I was invited to go to band camp the summer between my 4th and 5th grade year, which was kind of unheard of. You usually had to wait until you were in middle school to get to go do that. But I got to go as a grade schooler, very young, around a lot of older kids. And what was supposed to be this amazing experience for me turned out to be one of the most traumatic weeks of my life. And I'm not kidding. I was in a lot of counseling after this week. And it wasn't because I played trombone in the band, by the way. It was because I was bullied in a very real way and teased over and over again, and rumors were started about me all over band camp, and they had gotten back to me, and I remember walking from event to event and seeing people whisper and pointing and laughing, and it wrecked me. Like to the point where I could not emotionally handle things anymore. I was sobbing all of the time. I couldn't go to practice. I couldn't go to the games. I didn't want to be there anymore. And it got so bad that eventually my parents were called and they had to come get me a few days early before camp ended. That moment, that week in that summer was the end of innocence for me. It was the end of security. I don't know the last time you spent time with a grade school kid, but it's kind of fun because they have no idea what people think. And they don't really care. They're just going to be themselves. They're going to do what they want. They're going to move how they want. They're going to like the things they like. And it doesn't really matter what anybody thinks. And then you get to those years. For me, it was just before 5th grade. For a lot of us, it's into middle school where we realize, people are thinking things about us. They're saying things about us, and they're not always nice. And all of a sudden, we worry about the things that we wear. And we worry about how much we weigh. And we're concerned with who we hang out with. That moment was the end of that childhood for me. And I remember thinking, even that young, why, God? Why did you make me like this? Where I stood out. I mean, I'm not a small person. I'm easy to find anywhere. So anytime I walked into a room and anybody moved, I thought they were teasing me, making fun of me. Why, God, would you allow me to be built this way where everybody notices me? Why would you let me get to the place where those people would think those things and say those things about me? Even as an adult, God, why would you let my childhood end so early. We've all been there. We've all had moments where we've wondered, why, God, are you letting this thing come to an end? Why are you letting this moment happen that's going to change everything for me? And in a lot of ways, not for the best. As a corporate community, as a church, all together, we've experienced a lot of this lately. For some of us, this moment when Racine closed just a couple weeks ago, a lot of us were wondering, why, God, why would you let my community all of a sudden come to an abrupt end and now I have to commute to church? I thought this city needed this. I thought we were really excited about this mission, and now all of a sudden it's gone. God, why would you let that chapter come to an end? 2 weeks ago, it might have been this moment when we said goodbye to the founding pastor of Great Lakes Church. The DNA. For a lot of us, he's the reason that we finally started going to church again. He showed us that Jesus followers could be different. And not just because they stay out of movie theaters and they don't smoke cigarettes and all of that kind of stuff. He helped build a church that a lot of us go, it's the only church I've ever known and ever want to know. Why would God let him leave? Why would God put it in his head that he should go to Seattle and do ministry out there? Maybe for you personally, it's been the loss of a loved one. Why would their life come to an end? Maybe it was the end of a marriage. Why would God let that happen? Maybe it was the end of a pregnancy. Maybe it was the end of a friendship or a job. And you just find yourself going, God, I don't understand why you would bring something to such an abrupt conclusion. Because there's nothing but pain in that for me. So here's what I want you to know. That we're going to spend the next few weeks kind of wrestling with together. It's this one idea. Sometimes an ending is really a means to a different one. Sometimes these moments where what we thought was so good coming to an end, sometimes it's not about that end. It's about another end. And this end is the beginning of working towards that one, and that one is different. That one is better. There might be pain right now, but eventually we understand why. And Jesus, over and over again, would prove this to be true. But there's one moment in his, what we call his public ministry, where he was teaching and traveling and doing miracles. There's one moment that I think so vividly expresses this idea. And it's with a guy named Lazarus. Now, if you've never heard of Lazarus, he was one of Jesus' good friends. We don't call him a disciple. He wasn't in that group. But he and his two sisters, Mary and Martha, were like the landing spot for Jesus. Anytime he was traveling through Bethany, he would stop at their house and hang out with them. And you might know the story of Mary and Martha, where Martha's really busy in the kitchen and Mary's sitting at his feet, and Martha's mad at Mary, and it's a whole sister thing. But there's Lazarus, who gets really, really sick one day. Like terminally sick. And so the family goes, hey, we're not sure where Jesus is, but we need to send some people out because we got to get him back here. We know what he's capable of. He loves Lazarus like a brother. He's going to fix this. We don't know how, but we don't know how he turned water into wine either. So let's get him here and just let him know Lazarus is sick. So these messengers head out and they go to find Jesus, and they find Jesus pretty far off. And they say, Jesus, really bad news. Lazarus is sick and it's not looking good. We need you to come home with us right away. We need you to do your God thing because your friend is going to die. And the response from Jesus is not one anyone would have expected. If you're like me, you expect Jesus to go, okay, point me in the right direction. How do we get there? Let's go. But this is what Jesus says instead. Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God. So the Son of God will receive glory from this. Huh? Like, this is the moment where Peter was like, I have a question. What do you mean? You just heard your good friend is going to die, and you're talking about glory, and his words are really peculiar. Notice he says, this sickness is not going to end in death. If you know this story, there's a whole dying thing that happens. But Jesus said it won't end in death. And in that moment, we see what everybody else thought was an ending was not the ending that Jesus had in mind. And he says, in the end, I'm going to receive glory. Now, glory is a weird word that we don't use outside of these walls a lot. But if something good happens in our lives, a lot of times we'll say something like, well, I give God the glory. What do we actually mean when we say that? What does it mean when we say we give God the glory, or we want to glorify his name, or whatever the case may be? Here's what the original language would define it as. It's weightiness or divine power. So when Jesus says, this is for God's glory and ultimately my glory, it's to give weight to who I am and to show everybody that I am actually divine. That I'm not just a rabbi, I'm not just a good teacher, I'm not just a miracle worker or a magician, I'm actually God himself. That's what this is about. You see, what we see right here is that God's vision is bigger than the family's vision. For you and for me in our everyday lives, this is something we need to hold on to with white knuckles. God's vision for your life, what he sees for you in the future, is way bigger than anything you could imagine for yourself. The problem is we always have life's events right in front of us, and they're blocking our view because we don't have the perspective that he has. But Jesus comes along and he says, I can see right over this hurdle. I can see right over this fence, and there is some amazing things on the horizon. In fact, we say it a lot, but Jesus here would say, the best is yet to come. There's going to be a weight and a divinity measure to this that you would never have expected. And so what happens next seems to go in the opposite direction of what Jesus just said. Because here's what he says next. So although Jesus loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. And then when you fast forward just a few verses, a little bit later, it says this: when Jesus arrived at Bethany, where the family lived, he was told that Lazarus had already been dead in his grave for 4 days. This is the moment, if you ever struggled to wonder, like, does like God show up on my timing? Jesus proves no. He doesn't. It says, although he loved the family, he stayed put. And again, Peter would be like, I have a question. Why are we not moving? Because Bethany is very far away from where we are, Jesus, and if we don't get moving, nobody's going to think you're great. Nobody's going to think that you're a great friend or a great God or that you understand or any of that stuff. Come on. Jesus says, no, we're going to stay here. And then when he gets there, they say he's already been in the grave 4 days. Now, here's what's really important. That probably means that Lazarus has already been dead for 5 days. You got to understand a little something about the Jewish tradition and the Jewish law. If Lazarus has been in the grave for 4 days, one of the big rules, and I'll talk about this again in a second, is that you have to bury the dead within 24 hours. But there's a whole preparation phase that goes into the body, and you have to get them ready to go into the grave. So if he's already been in the grave 4 days, it's likely that he's actually been dead for 5 days, which means Lazarus probably died the moment the messengers left to go find Jesus. Because where Jesus is, and if you look in the context of the passage that we're looking at, it identifies where he's at. And if you look at it on a map, it's about 20 miles from Bethany. For a round trip then, it's about 40 miles. The messengers had to go 20 miles out, and then once Jesus heads back, it's 20 miles back. Now, 20 miles on foot is a long trip. And if you look at the terrain of that area, it was not an easy walk. This was more of a hike. Up, down, around, under, over, through the woods to Grandma's house. I mean, it was not an easy trek. So 40 miles round trip, and then 2 major rules. One I already mentioned, 24 hours, you've got to get that body into a grave. Part 2, you can't touch a dead body, because then you are unclean, and if you are unclean, you can't go to the temple. So, when Jesus arrives, it's not just the problem that he's dead and he's in the grave, it's that he's stuck in the grave. Because he can't go touch a dead body, Jesus. We can't send people in there to pull him out. You can't go there and pull him out. And so you got to sit and go, well, does Jesus actually love this family to let this happen? To go, well, we're going to sit here another 2 days, and then we'll kind of mosey the 20 miles over there, and I kind of already know he's dead because of timing. Really, Jesus? But what we're about to find is that Jesus' love is bigger too. It's not just what he can see and what he knows can happen in the lives of these people. It's that his love for them is so deep, he's willing to do something that in the moment is going to cause pain. But in the long run, is going to change everything. That's how much Jesus loves them. That he is going to allow them to be part of something literally miraculous. So this is what happens next. Jesus says, Lazarus is dead. And for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there. Peter again with the question, like, that doesn't sound very nice, Jesus. He's dead. I'm glad he's dead for your sakes, and for not, because now you'll really believe. Come, let's go see him. I love that moment. Like, all right, come, let's go see him. And everybody's going, but wait a minute, the dead body, we can't go see him. Wait, like the visitation's over, Jesus. They closed the grave. It's done. Jesus says, no, there's something incredible that's about to happen. This was for your sake. What Jesus does in this moment is he infuses it with purpose and promise. The purpose is you are going to see something that is going to blow your mind, and he ties it back, or we think back at least, to the glory that he already mentioned. So you're going to understand the divinity, you're going to understand God and his power because of this man dying that seems so bad, but ultimately is going to be so good. And here's the promise, you're going to see him. Remember, his sickness will not end in death. Come, let's go see him. You see, Jesus' goal is bigger too. His vision for his people, his friends, is bigger. His love for them is bigger. And his goal, what he's going to accomplish in this moment, is bigger than the goals they had. Their goal was, hey, let's just not have them be sick anymore. Jesus is going to take it 50 times further and show them something absolutely incredible. Spoiler alert. He's about to raise this guy from the dead and change everybody for all time. And I wonder if it was this moment in Jesus' ministry that Paul was thinking about when he wrote these words in one of his letters. God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. You probably heard that sentence before. You probably have a bookmark somewhere with that on it. You might have a magnet on your refrigerator. Have you ever thought about it in these kinds of terms? Can you imagine if Paul had been on the scene and Mary and Martha are saying, our brother is dead, and he goes, but don't worry, God uses all things. He brings them together for good. I mean, Paul's perspective is one thing. He's on the other side of the resurrection that's about to happen. It's very different, and it's a little bit easier than the perspective of his sisters. But what Paul is communicating to us is that sometimes an ending is really a means to a different one. Sometimes the moment where the chapter concludes, it's not actually the end of the story. It's just the end of the chapter. And the story is grander. The story is greater. The story is bigger than what you or I could put together on our own. And that's what Jesus is about to do. But that perspective is tricky. Here's the perspective of his sisters who are in the moment. He's met by them on the road into Bethany, and they say, Lord, if only you'd been here, my brother would not have died. Lord, if only you'd shown up, my marriage wouldn't have ended. My pregnancy wouldn't have ended. My job wouldn't have ended. My mom or my dad wouldn't have died. My campus wouldn't have closed. My pastor wouldn't have left. If only you had been here. You must not be here. That's us in our context, right? God, you must not be here. Because if you were, this thing that I want, that I believe to be best, wouldn't have happened. You see, we think that he doesn't know. When we're in it, like Mary and Martha, we think he doesn't know. He doesn't know what's going on. Not only does he not know, he doesn't really seem to care. God is this far off, wound the toy up, let us go marching like the monkey with the cymbals, and he's just kind of entertained by it all, but he doesn't really know what's happening. He's not down in the nitty-gritty. But what we are mistaking is that God's vision for our life is actually bigger than what we can see. So it feels in this moment like God does not know what I'm facing. And I think God sometimes goes, you don't know what you're facing. I do, because I can see over this chapter. And my vision for you is bigger than you can imagine. So Jesus gets to the scene, and he looks around, and the next few sentences are so perplexing because it just seems like not the way Jesus should have responded. But this is what happens. When Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled. Now, most people think, wow, Jesus is kind of cruel. They're sad and he's mad at them for being sad. The truth is, Jesus isn't mad at them being sad. When you read the next sentence, you'll understand that. I think what Jesus is mad at is that death exists at all. He's mad that these people have to feel what they're feeling. And he's upset that humanity is not getting to experience the life that he intended for them. And ultimately, he does something about that. But the next sentence, he can't be mad at them for weeping because he asks, where have you put them? They told him, Lord, come and see. And then Jesus wept. See, we sometimes think he doesn't care, right? Jesus, he must not care. But in this moment, the God of the universe is so sad by other people's sadness and the death of his friend that he actually cries. And he knows what he's about to do. And he still weeps. Why? Because Jesus' love is bigger. It's bigger than this thing in front of us. It's bigger than this ending. And so even though he knew this wasn't it, he still cared. I believe there's this moment where everyone around needed to see Jesus care. And so he allowed himself to cry. But then, Jesus shouted, "Lazarus, come out." Can you imagine being there? I mean, just be there for a minute. Like, everybody's crying, everybody's sad, they prepared his body, they put him in the grave, and here walks up Jesus, wipes the tears away and goes, "Lazarus, let's go." And everybody around there is going, "What is this guy doing?" And then Peter goes, "Question." And the dead man came out, and his hands and feet bound in grave clothes. This was not him sleeping for a little bit. They had put him to bed. His face wrapped in a headcloth. Jesus told them, "Unwrap him and let him go, because he's not going back in there." This is the end that begins something new. And in that moment, when they thought, like we think, he wasn't going to deliver because he didn't do what they thought he should do, he exceeded all expectations. And he delivered something they actually needed, which was bigger than what they wanted. Because Jesus' goal was bigger all along. I'm not just going to wow you with making this illness disappear from Lazarus. I'm going to show you that I am God himself, because only God himself could take a dead man that's been in the grave for 4 days and pull him out of there. Let me say that differently. Call him out of there. It's not like Jesus went in there and drug him out and resuscitated him. He just said, "Lazarus, come on out," and here he comes walking. I don't know about you. I think I would run the other way, though, in that moment. That would have freaked me out. And just a few weeks later, Jesus would do it again. Only this time, he'd let the body be in the grave for 3 days, and it'd be his own. And he'd walk out of there too. See, his goal's bigger. And here's what's crazy. In this moment, his goal wasn't even the resurrection. Remember where it started? So that God will receive glory. Here's what happened. As a result, many of the people who were with Mary believed in Jesus when they saw this happen. You and I know about Jesus because there were people that day that were changed forever. And they told their friends and family, who told their friends and family, who told their friends and family, until it got to you and me. You see, when they came to Jesus and said, "Your friend is going to die," he knew that there was something far greater at stake. He knew that in this moment, what they saw as an end was actually a beginning. He knew that this was going to be a means to an end, because sometimes an ending is a means to another one. And in your life and in my life, there are going to be endings that are going to be painful. And it's not that Jesus doesn't know. It's not that Jesus doesn't care. It's not that Jesus doesn't deliver. It's just that his understanding of you and his love for you and his goals for you are bigger than you. And so sometimes he lets things end so that he can get to where he wants us to be. This is why this is so important for you. And it's been so important for me in my life as I've faced hard endings over and over again. It's this idea. When an ending is also a start, it becomes a means to another end. And then, a means to an end has meaning. The reason we ask God why me, why now, why them, is because we don't understand what any of it means. And when the pieces start to fall in place and we get to see the other bigger, greater, grander end that God is leading us towards, we start to go, oh, that hard season in my life, it had meaning. It means something. 5 years after that summer in band camp, I stayed in band, and my director came to me and he said, I think you should come now as a high school student, and you should be a counselor to the middle school students. That place was a dark place. I was not ready to go back there. But I'm a people pleaser. So I said yes. And I'll never forget, on Thursday of that week, that summer, one of the sponsors for the week came up to me and said, hey, I need you to come with me. And she led me down this road and around the side of this one cabin where there was a pond back there, and there was a bench next to the pond. There was a little blonde boy sitting on that bench. And she said, Josh, that's Louie. He's getting bullied. And he wants to go home. And I think you're the only person that can talk to him. Fast forward, I get to be a pastor. And suddenly, all of that had meaning. Because what I thought was the end of my innocence, what I thought was the end of my security, was actually the beginning of something bigger that God was doing in my life. And what I believe is that for our church, what has felt like a series of endings is likely just the beginning of something far bigger. And the same's true for you. So, here's what we do. When we find ourselves in it, in that season, first step, we just wait. We just wait for Jesus. Because when they came and they told Jesus that Lazarus was dying, the disciples were forced to wait. Are we leaving now? No. Well, how about now? No. It's been 24 hours. Are we leaving now? No, we're not leaving now. Wait until I move, and then you just follow me. Sometimes in our lives, we need to just go, okay, Jesus, I'm waiting on you. I'm going to wait until you move. I don't know what this is. I don't know why you're allowing this. I don't know what the ending is about, let alone the beginning of whatever you're heading me towards. But I'm just going to wait for you to move because I don't know the way there. You do. And then when he moves, all we need to do is start watching what he does. Have our eyes open. Because that's what the disciples did. They just started walking, and then they got to Bethany, and they watched him do it, and their mouth came open, and that's the last step. We just sit and wonder over what God has done. It's not rocket science. I know I didn't just deliver the greatest application of a message ever, but I really believe it's that simple. Just wait for Jesus to move, watch what he does, and then wonder over what he has accomplished in your life. The more we get to know each other, the more you're going to hear my story, the more you're going to go, I can't believe that's the guy standing up there talking to me. Because over and over again, there's been endings that were really beginnings that changed everything and brought me to the place I'm at today. And at some point, I'll face another ending. And I'll have to sit and wait for Jesus to move and then watch what he does and wonder over what he accomplishes. Because sometimes an ending is really a means to a different one. Let me pray. Jesus, there's parts of that story that we just walked through that are a little unsettling, to be honest with you. When you didn't move right away to go rescue your friend, I'm not always sure what to think about that. And when you say, I'm glad he died for your sake, that feels weird. And when you cried, it's just a little unsettling that the God of the universe who knew he was going to just in a minute bring this guy back to life was sad over it. But that's really when you seem to teach us most, when we're just kind of confused and we don't know why you're doing what you're doing or allowing what you're allowing. It's in those moments you stretch us and teach us most about who you are. And you remind us that what you have in store for us is bigger than what we would plan or even imagine. It's bigger than what we want in the moment. So here's what I need. Maybe my friends do too. I just need to trust you more. And I don't have that in me, so I need it from you. Help me to trust you. Help me to be willing to wait and watch so that later I can sit with my mouth open in awe of what you've done. We love you. Thank you for being a God who's all about starting something new when we think something's done. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for joining us here at Great Lakes Church. Again, my name is Carson, and I'm so glad that you chose to share some time with us this week. We hope something in this talk was meaningful to you, encouraging to you, and maybe even something worth writing down that you can go share with a friend. If you'd like to get involved, maybe join us at one of our physical locations in Southeast Wisconsin, or just be a part of our many other goings-on our social platforms or events in the area. Check out greatlakeschurch.com.